Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are covering a story. It's pretty interesting, and maybe this is a story about bias. And we all know that bias in journalism or any kind of reporting exists, but does bias exist in reporting on comic books? Apparently, that is the case. The controversial comic news website Bleeding Cool under massive fire for failing to cover Eric July's successful Rippaverse campaign. So if you're not familiar with this, here is what it is. Okay, so Bleeding Cool at the center of controversy again, this time for failing to cover the largest crowdfund comic of all time ever, Eric July's Isom #1. Rippa has, as of this writing, raised more than $3.2 million in this comic campaign. Fans and professionals are reacting, wondering if there might be political and racial bias in the reporting. Let's find out. The one piece Bleeding Cool published on the Rippaverse includes a passive-aggressive jab at the African-American creator, questioning its price point for a 96-page comic book by comparing it to direct market retail, rather than comparing it to similar crowdfunded books. The author also made comments questioning Rippa's ethics in the article, and this will play in later on. Okay, as a comic-centric website, readers are wondering why Bleeding Cool isn't covering Rippaverse. For other titles, Bleeding Cool either routinely posts preview images, summaries of the plot points, covers the milestones of sales, things like that. And Rippaverse has more than 30,000 backers as of now. Actually, Isom #1 has higher sales than many Marvel and DC comics. That is huge, and that's huge for a essentially self-published story here, a self-published comic book. Eric July is doing this himself. So it seems like the Rippaverse should be a big story, and it should. It absolutely should. Why in the hell is it not being covered, though? That's a good question. Interestingly, Richard Johnston, purveyor of Bleeding Cool, seems more worried about making fun of Republicans than covering comic book news. Aha, so here it comes. This is someone with TDS, right? Someone who is one of these deranged anti-Republican type people. In my opinion, this is not the way to run a business, but, hey, whatever, right? This is his business. He can run it into the ground if he wants to. And to me, it seems like that's probably where he's going. He recently took to his personal Facebook page to share a rather inflammatory post stating, so how will Fox News react to the confirmation from DC Comics that Lex Luthor is a Republican? I mean, come on. This is just idiotic. Like that means anything. Lex Luthor is literally a made-up character. He's not really a Republican. And who assigned him to be a Republican? He obviously didn't choose to be a Republican himself. Somebody at DC Comics wrote it in. And by the way, he's a Republican. Because, of course, we're going to write that. But here's the thing. What the hell does this even matter? It's beside the point. This is actually meaningless. This is completely meaningless. So anyways, it garnered one interesting comment, though. And that was by Dan Fraga. How will Bleeding Cool react to Eric July making $1 million in a day on a self-platformed comic? So a nice little jab back at Mr. Richard Johnston there for failing to cover something that was quite significant and that directly falls into the space of something that Bleeding Cool should absolutely be covering. So, how will Bleeding Cool react to Eric July making $1 million in a day on a self-platform comic? Dan Fraga, artist and creator of Black Flag, made that comment. And if you don't know, Black Flag is another book that has many sales in crowdfunding and is I guess pretty well received. Unwilling to let Johnston's comment get brushed under the rug, the Black Flag creator took to Twitter to share the screenshot of both the Bleeding Cool author and his own comments. Followed up with a question: comic news should cover all comics, especially when it's real news. That seems legitimate to me as well. If you run a news website for comics, you should probably be covering the important comic news of the day. Fraga's comments here point out an inherent bias in the comic industry, and this is what I was just talking about with the Lex Luthor comment. Major comic book news sites like Bleeding Cool, Comic Book Resources, IGN blatantly refuse to cover projects made by right-wing creators. Why are they right-wing? Okay, you could call them conservative. Maybe they're centrist. I think the point is what does anyone's political ideology have to do with a comic book? The whole idea of the Rippaverse is that it doesn't use identity politics, that it's actually just about telling a good story. And apparently that makes you like a hateful or bad person to just want to tell a good story. Even if you're a centrist, you're considered right-wing. But what does it have to actually do with comics? I mean, the part of comics are about escapism. They're about, just having some entertainment, right? Just having some fun and wanting to escape into a good story. And that's essentially what the Rippaverse is all about. It eschews the identity politics, which are popular right now, for just telling good, compelling stories and maybe using something like traditional archetypes, which are more of a uniters of humanity versus something else. This is what the old school comic books were like. They were telling stories, they used archetypes, and essentially a lot of them were about, trying to show the best parts of humanity or how humanity and humans could rise above things and join together for common goals and be better people. I mean, that's a great story right there. But now we don't tell those stories anymore. Now we tell stories where we have to put everybody in a box. And if you're in the wrong box, then that automatically makes you a bad person. And what determines what box you're in is your skin color or who you choose to have sex with. Like, again, why does any of this even matter? It's ridiculous. It's all ridiculous. There appears to be heavy political bias involved in comic reporting, with Bounding Into Comics and Bleeding Fool, whose name is a parody on Rich Johnston's own comic news site, being some of the only publications to cover content creators like Fraga or July. And, Johnston maintained if he said he was a Democrat, I would have written the same article. I would have written the same article and I would have made fun of him and I would have questioned his ethics. Okay. Well, look, here's the thing. Here's really what it boils down to. Fan and comic creator Richard Embry found Johnston's post to be disingenuous, calling him out. If you're about fairness, where's your article about Eric July hitting 3 million? That's huge for a black-owned business. And then he then inquired, aren't you about inclusivity? Why aren't you celebrating this amazing achievement? Rich Johnston then says, well, the last time I wrote something, I got attacked, lied about, and generally abused online. Maybe it's because you were an asshole. Maybe it's because, you were intentionally comparing this book and being disingenuous in your comparison, saying, here's a crowdfund comic, and I'm going to compare it to a mainstream comic, a retail comic, and then I'm going to make fun or question why it's so expensive. Because it's not a normal retail comic. This is a crowdfunded comic, and it goes for the same prices as most crowdfunded comics. And this guy fucking knows this shit. He knows this because he covers this shit. But he's being disingenuous because he's trying to get wokey points or some bullshit like that. Then he goes and questions the ethics of the creator. And I'm assuming that that's related to, the cost of it. But if you're going to question the ethics of the guy, then he has every right to push back against you. And he has every right to call you a dipshit or an asshole and tell you to actually put up or shut up. Like, show how he's actually being corrupt in some way. Show how his ethics are actually lacking. Because if you can't do that, then you're the one that should shut the hell up, basically. I still have no response to my initial emails. This guy is asking for permission to cover a comic book. Really? Does he do that with all of the comic books he covers? I guarantee you, this guy does not fucking do this. He is full of shit on this, and he's just being an ass. That's what it boils down to. He's acting like an ass because Eric July is successful. He is hugely successful, but he's not a super woke progressive, and he doesn't push identity politics. He's a minority who is super successful on his self-platformed, group-funded comic book. And these people like this, they hate anyone. They hate anyone who's successful, but they especially hate anyone who's successful if they're a minority and they're not progressive. Okay, so that is that. Like, this is just a bunch of BS is what it boils down to. If you want to see where Ripaverse is at, you can go to ripaverse.com. You can go and view the campaign. You can see the campaign is sitting at $3.27 million with 37,668 purchasers, 57 days left. If this looks like it's your sort of thing, go check it out. If it looks like your sort of thing, you should go get it. And if you want to help me to continue to keep smashing the narrative, then smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, because we are just getting started. I'll see you on the next video.